Today, I'm going to show you how to boost the gaming performance of your Ryzen processor by 10% with this one simple trick. And no, it doesn't involve having to tune your memory timings. It's much easier than that. And in fact, you won't risk compromising stability at all. Sounds too good, I know, but somehow this is a thing. But before I tell you all my secrets, today's sponsor spot is brought to you by Thermal Grizzly and their CryoSheet graphene thermal pads, which are an excellent alternative to thermal pastes. They offer very high thermal conductivity with no liquid components, so they can't dry out and therefore don't degrade over time like pastes and even liquid metals. CryoSheet is very easy to use, it's extremely durable, and is available in a range of sizes to suit most applications. I've personally done some high-end GPU testing with CryoSheet, and the results were impressive, very similar in fact to that of liquid metal, but without the mess, and of course, no risk of drying out. So for more information, please check the link in the video description. So what's going on here? Well, last week, AMD published a community post on their blog, which we've already addressed in a dedicated video because we felt that overall it was a pretty bad post. And if you want to know why we felt that way, it's probably best to just go watch that video. Now, one of the claims AMD made in that blog post was that Zen 5's gaming performance was going to see a strong boost with the upcoming Windows 11 24H2 build. And for those of you that want to take a sneak peek, you can do so via Microsoft's Insider program. AMD says that the Zen 5 architecture incorporates a wider branch prediction capacity than prior Zen generations. They went on to say that their automated testing software requires them to run in the system administrator mode, which produces results that reflect branch prediction code optimizations not present in the version of Windows reviewers use to test the Ryzen 9000 series. Therefore, they heavily implied that by using the optimized AMD-specific branch prediction code, Zen 5's gaming performance would improve relative to Zen 4. But we've already benchmarked Zen 5 and Zen 4 using the System Administrator account and provided that data in a dedicated video where we previously discovered that this wasn't the case. Zen 4 and Zen 5 scaled equally. All of that said, we are yet to test Windows 11 24H2, so that's what we'll be doing today, comparing the Ryzen 7 9700X and 7700X in over 40 games using both 24H2 and 23H2. It's been a ton of work to get all this data out, and I think it's worth going over all of it in this video because there are some mind-blowing numbers. So let's get into it. And we're of course going to start with the most important game for CPU testing, Party Animals. And I guess if you know, you know. Remarkably, using 24H2, the 9700X saw a massive 19% performance increase, which means whereas it was previously 4% slower than the 7700X, it's now 5% faster. So a nice little swing there for Zen 5. Maybe the optimized branch prediction code really does benefit Zen 5 the most. Now, in my day one review, ACC provided by far the biggest win for the 9700X over the 7700X. And here we can see when using the 23H2 version of Windows 11 that it's 18% faster. Now, when using 24H2, we see that the 9700X enjoys a nice 8% performance boost, but the 7700X also saw an 11% boost, meaning that when using the optimized branch prediction code, the 7700X actually saw the greatest benefit in this example, and as a result, the 9700X is now 15% faster in this title. Probably second only to Party Animals, Rocket League is one of the best games to test CPU performance. And of course, that's a lie. I'm not sure why you would actually use either of these games for testing modern CPUs, but this is something AMD did, and a few other reviewers also used Rocket League for reviewing the performance of Zen 5. So I guess here it is. Previously using 23H2, the 9700X was 10% faster, and with 24H2, it's 13% faster. So a nice little improvement there relative to Zen 4, but more impressive than that is the fact that these Ryzen processors are seeing a 13 to 16% performance uplift with this newer unreleased version of Windows 11. And that's pretty incredible. And sure, the frame rates are meaningless once you get to this extreme level, but the gains themselves are still quite impressive, or very impressive, really. And speaking of impressive gains, I really have no idea what's going on here, and I triple-checked this data, I copied over settings, but I couldn't fault it. Somehow, we're looking at a 35% performance uplift for the 9700X in Gears 5, simply by using the new 24H2 build. The 7700X also saw a massive 33% increase, so both CPUs received a massive performance boost by using this preview build of Windows 11. Pretty crazy stuff. But of course, not all games are seeing huge performance gains. Some are more modest, like we're seeing here in Halo Infinite, where we're only looking at a 2 to 4% improvement. Still, that's essentially free performance, so we're not exactly complaining. Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege did provide us with more massive gains. Both CPUs saw a 13% uplift, which again is amazing to see, though that did mean the 9700X was 6% faster using either version of Windows. So again, the scaling here remained pretty consistent, or very consistent really. We're also looking at huge gains in F124. The 9700X enjoyed a 17% boost, and the 7700X a massive 20% boost. I had to go and check this data several times. It's difficult to believe that the 24H2 build could lead to this kind of performance uplift, but the results are accurate. And of course, this data isn't an outlier in our testing. The Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 gains are also massive. The 9700X received a big 17% boost, though that was nothing compared to the 27% performance injection the 7700X received. Incredibly, whereas the 7700X was 5% slower than the 9700X using the current build of Windows, the upcoming 24H2 build will see it hit the lead by a mere 2%. Moving on to the Callisto Protocol, we're again looking at a 25% increase for the 7700X. And again, I don't know how this kind of performance uplift is possible. It's quite baffling to see. And it also raises the question, how has Zen 4 been underperforming by this much for so long? And apparently this also affects Zen 3 CPUs. The 9700X also enjoys a 20% performance boost, but whereas it was 6% faster using 23H2, it's less than a percent faster on 24H2. The 7700X also does well in Assassin's Creed Mirage, this time enjoying a 10% boost, while the 9700X only saw a 3% boost. And again, I triple checked this data, so although AMD strongly hinted at this being mostly a Zen 5 optimization, we're certainly finding examples where Zen 4 benefits as much or if not more. I've seen people claiming that Zen 5 is a beast in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, but I'm not really seeing it. A 5% uplift on 23H2 isn't exactly amazing, and the margin is only extended to 6% on 24H2. That said, we do see a nice 15% uplift when using the newer version of Windows, so that really is the real story here. Both CPUs also see a nice performance boost in Spider-Man Remastered, in the range of 5 to 8%. In this example, 24H2 does benefit the Zen 5 part more, extending the 9700X's lead from 5% to 8%. Moving on to A Plague Tale Requiem, both CPUs see a nice 7% performance boost using 24H2, so although this doesn't help Zen 5 distance itself from Zen 4, it's still great to see what is essentially a free performance boost for both CPUs. Interestingly, the 9700X saw no performance uplift when testing with Skull and Bones, while the 7700X became 4% faster, basically making the Zen 4 processor slightly slower on 23H2 and now slightly faster on 24H2. We're also looking at a 3 to 6% uplift in Ghost of Tsushima, and frankly, this was more than what I was expecting to find. Not some of the truly massive gains that we have seen. Anyway, in this example, the upgrade is more beneficial for Zen 5, taking it from a mere 3% lead to a more impressive 6% lead, which is still pretty small, but obviously much better than what we were seeing originally. Now, the performance boost in Homeworld 3 is massive. We're looking at a 20 to 23% increase, and now both CPUs are delivering the same level of performance using 24H2. What's crazy here is that AMD claimed to have seen some of its biggest gains with 24H2 in Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty, and while we are seeing a nice 7% increase for the 9700X and 9% for the 7700X, these are far from the best gains we've seen. Still a nice result overall, though it did help the 7700X close in on the 9700X. And I should note we're not using the built-in benchmark, we are testing in-game in Dogtown. Now, whereas the 9700X was just 2% faster than the 7700X using 23H2, moving to 24H2 boosts performance quite considerably, though more so for the 7700X, which is now 4% faster. Still, overall performance between these two CPUs is very similar, And again, the real news here is the up to 16% performance boost provided by Windows 24H2. I had to retest Far Cry that many times that I've lost count at this point. Again, I couldn't find anything wrong with the test setup, so it seems that 24H2 is offering a significant performance gain here. The 7700X saw a 14% boost and the 9700X 15%, which is pretty wild stuff. Unfortunately, we're not really seeing any solid performance gains when testing with Baldur's Gate 3. Both CPUs saw a 3% increase, so a negligible performance difference that you're certainly not going to notice, but it's not slower, so anything's a bonus really. For testing Black Myth Wukong, we're doing so in-game, so we're not using the built-in benchmark, but even so, the performance gains aren't huge. But a 6% uplift for the 7700X and 5% for the 9700X is still really nice to see. We're seeing more mild gains in Hitman 3, just a 4% uplift for the 7700X and 3% for the 9700X, though this did help the 7700X close in on the Zen 5 part. We see that the 24H2 build offers next to no gains for Ryzen in Counter-Strike 2, though the 2% improvement for the 9700X does see it offer a small 3% increase over the 7700X. Horizon Zero Dawn saw the 7700X's performance improve by 7% with the 24H2 build, while we saw just a 5% increase for the 9700X. This means, whereas the 9700X was slightly faster using the current build of Windows, it's slightly slower with the upcoming 24H2 build, though needless to say Zen 4 and Zen 5 performance overall is very similar in this title. I've seen some Zen 5 Day 1 reviews claiming big performance gains for Zen 5 in Total War Warhammer 3, but sadly I was unable to reproduce those results using either the Ultra or Low preset. Essentially, performance appears to be pretty much the same, though you will see a nice 5% uplift when running 24H2. Now, AMD loves to run Ashes of the benchmark, but when using the CPU focus test with the Extreme preset, we found the exact same performance for the 7700X and 9700X, and sadly, the Insider Preview build didn't really improve performance. Forza Horizon 5 is another game where we saw no difference between Zen 4 and Zen 5, though we did see a nice 6% performance uplift when using 24H2. Returnal is another game that provides similar results for Zen 4 and Zen 5, and this time the new Windows 11 build doesn't improve performance. Hunt Showdown 1896 also saw similar Zen 4 and Zen 5 performance, and this is another example where the new Windows 11 build doesn't boost Ryzen performance. The 7700X and 9700X are also very evenly matched in Hogwarts Legacy, but we see a 14% uplift for the 7700X and 17% for the 9700X when using 24H2. So that's awesome to see, especially for a title that is in desperate need of additional performance. Both CPUs are very evenly matched when testing with Forza Motorsport, but we are seeing a massive 20% performance uplift when switching over to 24H2, so that is awesome to see. The 7700X was slightly faster than the 9700X in Shadow of the Tomb Raider using 23H2, and then slightly slower with the upcoming 24H2 build. Essentially, the 7700X saw almost no performance uplift for 24H2, while the 9700X became 5% faster. Now, the Star Wars Jedi Survivor results are a bit confusing, because again, the performance uplift is just too extreme. Again, I triple checked this data, I made sure the game was using the exact same settings on both Windows installs, so short of an error on my end, I don't really know how to explain a 20% uplift for the 7700X and a mammoth 32% increase for the 9700X. Other than the obvious, it's the optimized AMD specific branch prediction code, but damn, that is a serious optimization, or rather previously Windows was just very unoptimized for Ryzen. We're looking at a 4 to 5% boost when playing Dying Light 2 on 24H2, so performance scaling was similar using either CPU. We see that the 24H2 build is only providing a very mild 3% gain for these processors in The Last of Us Part 1, so while we're more than happy to take the extra performance, the boost here is much smaller than many of the games we've already looked at. For those of you who play Fortnite, the 24H2 gains for Ryzen processors are massive. The 7700X saw a 20% FPS boost, while the 9700X received an incredible 31% boost. This also means, whereas the 7700X is 3% faster when running the current 23H2 build, The upcoming version should see the 9700X hit the lead by a 5% margin. World War Z provides us with another example where Zen 4 is faster on the current Windows build, but slightly slower using 24H2. This is because while the 7700X saw an impressive 15% gain when moving to the newer Windows 11 build, the 9700X saw an incredible 22% uplift. Sadly, there are no gains to be had for Starfield, a game that desperately needs more performance, and this means for our testing the 7700X remains 4% faster. The 7700X saw a very mild 3% uplift in Watch Dogs Legion, while the 9700X enjoyed a much more substantial 9% uplift. So this is another example where Zen 5 was slightly slower on the current Windows build, but then slightly faster with the upcoming 24H2 build. Testing with Mount and Blade 2 Bannerlord, the 7700X saw a 4% increase when using 24H2, while the 9700X saw a more substantial 7% uplift. So, Zen 5 is certainly benefiting more here, though the overall result is really very much the same. The results in Remnant 2 are very interesting, as this is another example that seems to benefit Zen 5 more than Zen 4. For example, as it stands right now, the 9700X is just 2% faster than the 7700X, but with the upcoming 24H2 update, it should end up 11% faster, which is a massive shift. There's not much of a performance gain to be had in Horizon Forbidden West, which is disappointing to see, so the 7700X remains a tiny bit faster in this title. Then finally, we have the Riftbreaker, and here the 7700X enjoyed a 9% performance boost on the 24H2 build, while the 9700X saw a much more substantial 19% boost. However, this means that the 9700X is now able to match the 7700X, so from that angle, it's less exciting for the Zen 5 part. Okay, so here's a look at the performance uplift for the Ryzen 7 7700X on 24H2 when compared to what we see on the current 23H2 build. Unbelievably, on average, this upcoming Windows version should boost the 7700X's gaming performance by 10% on average. That is incredible, and I don't really recall seeing anything like this before. Some of the gains, or really many of the gains, are hard to believe. It's wild to think that the architectural changes seen with Zen 5 only resulted in a 3% uplift for gaming, based on our testing, whereas this Windows update is boosting the previous generation parts by 10%. That's crazy stuff, but let's see what it does for the 9700X. The improvements for the 9700X really are very similar to what we just saw with the 7700X. So an 11% increase on average, and this means when AMD says Zen 5 will see the biggest uplift, they're technically not wrong, but it's also so insignificant that it's not worth calling this a Zen 5 optimization. It's kind of a white lie, really, because really it's just a Ryzen optimization. Still, the results are incredible, as I've said several times now. What isn't really that impressive is how the 9700X compares to the 7700X in our 43 game sample. On the current Windows 11 23H2 build, we found that on average, the 9700X was just 1% faster. So whereas our 13 game sample used for our day one review, which included the ACC outlier, saw the 9700X provide a 3% uplift on average. But in reality, across a wider range of games, it appears to be just a 1% improvement. So essentially, there really is no improvement when you test enough games. So then what do we see with the 24H2 build, which AMD says benefits Zen 5 more than Zen 4? Again, across the 43 games tested, the 9700X was on average just 2% faster, which again is a percent less than what we found in our day one review. So after all of the craziness that has occurred over the past few weeks and claims of 5 to 8% and then even 9% from AMD, it seems like the truth is more like 2%. So a single low-digit margin, which is basically what every tech media outlet around the world has already reported, bar a few outliers who probably messed up with their testing. But, not pointing fingers there, just saying it seems unlikely that you're going to see a 10, 11, 12, 13% uplift on average for gaming. It just doesn't seem possible. Okay, so we just looked at some pretty wild performance gains for Ryzen when using the 24H2 build, and I hear you screaming from the rooftops, what about Intel? As I'm sure you can appreciate, this testing takes an incredible amount of time, But like you, I was pretty interested to see if there were going to be any benefits here for Intel users, especially after AMD representatives have publicly stated that Intel will see no performance improvement on 24H2. So I just had to take a quick look and see what's going on. Since the 9700X saw good gains in Borderlands 3, I decided to start there. The Core i5 14600K, however, saw no performance change in this title between the two Windows builds. I then tried Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty and found the same thing, no performance gains for the 14600K. And then in Far Cry 6, where the 9700X saw jaw-dropping improvements, the 14600K saw nothing, not a single extra frame. But remember that insane performance uplift for the 9700X in Gears 5? Well, it seems something is going on there, because even the 14600K saw a 25% uplift when testing on 24H2. So either there is something odd going on with this game, or it's just very limited by the current 23H2 build. I'm not sure what's going on there. I am using the built-in benchmark for this one, so the results should be pretty easy to replicate, and perhaps I would see a different set of results if I was testing in-game, and that's something I'll look at over the next few weeks. So this Windows update is going to be a seriously big deal for AMD and its users. And if the data we've seen here is anything to go by, then you should be in for around a 10% uplift on average, with the gains at the extreme end just over 30%, which is pretty wild. We saw almost no examples where the performance didn't improve, and we saw no examples where the performance regressed. This really is a monumental win for AMD, but I do find myself second-guessing some of the data. It just seems too significant, a bit too good to be true, if you know what I mean. But unfortunately, at this point in time, all the reviewers that I'm in contact with are yet to do any testing with this Windows update, so I don't really have anyone to use as a bit of a sanity check. AMD does claim a 13% uplift in Far Cry 6 for the 9950X, which is very similar to the 15% gain I saw with the 9700X. But I did also find a number of games which saw greater gains than 15%, and some even over 20%, which again seems like too much of an uplift, but after multiple verifications, this is what I found. Given these findings, we're even more confused by AMD's marketing, and of course their recent community blog post. If there are indeed double-digit gains to be had here, which certainly does appear to be the case, and AMD themselves have also suggested that, then why even talk about all the reviews, the review data, and essentially point the blame at reviewers in your community blog post? Like, it doesn't make sense. And then they also, went on to thank them towards the end of the post, effectively talking out both sides of their mouth. So why not ignore all of that and just celebrate the fact that Ryzen owners will now be getting a free performance boost? And it's a good performance uplift for gaming. It's a bonus for those who have already bought Ryzen processors, as well as those who plan on picking up a Zen 5 part in the future, as it does make the Zen 5 product better for gaming. Not necessarily relative to Zen 4, but it certainly makes it a more impressive product. And, that's incredibly good news for AMD and those who plan on or who have purchased Ryzen processors. So, seems like a massive missed opportunity to highlight all of this. Unfortunately, AMD did continue to mislead people with their blog post, only showing a performance uplift for the 9950X, though they did note that Zen 4 and Zen 3 owners can expect gains as well, but they did their best to paint this as a Zen 5 optimized update. The truth is, none of this really helps Zen 5 relative to Zen 4. This doesn't change what the vast majority of reviewers have said about Zen 5's gaming performance. Again, relative to Zen 4, it is still very disappointing. And in fact, this larger sample of games furthers that point. It's now even more disappointing than we originally thought. It also doesn't explain how AMD is claiming up to a 9% boost in gaming performance on average for Zen 5 over Zen 4. Unless there's something wrong with my Zen 5 processors, that simply isn't possible, and based on what just about everyone else has found at this point, AMD has to be high as a kite with those claims. Relative to Intel though, this upcoming Windows build will no doubt help close the gap, but of course this is something we need to test, and yeah, I do plan on comparing the 9700X and Core i7 14700K in over 40 games using both versions of Windows, but you'll have to be patient as that testing will take about a week. Also, once the 24H2 build is officially rolled out, I will be updating all of our CPU results, but until then, I'd almost take this data with a grain of salt, as we are using what is technically a preview build of Windows, though I don't imagine too much will change between now and the rollout. The key takeaway from all of this testing being that 24H2 does greatly improve Ryzen's gaming performance, but it does not improve Zen 5's position relative to Zen 4, at least not in a meaningful way. So I want to be really clear on that. There are examples where the 9700X benefited more from the optimizations than the 7700X, but there are also examples where the Zen 4 part made out a bit better as well, and we saw that overall scaling was similar between Zen 4 and Zen 5. So that's where we're at. About the 10th rabbit hole that we've had to go down now in search of the missing Zen 5 gaming performance. And it seems like at this point, for those of you still struggling with the reality, you just need to accept that relative to Zen 4, the Zen 5 processors, they're just not that much faster for gaming, if at all. And that is going to do it for this video. If you like, you know what to do, subscribe to all the YouTube stuff. We also have some Hardware Unboxed membership things you can sign up to. Links are in the video description. Check that out if you're interested, but if not, it's perfectly fine. And I would like to thank you for watching this video. I'm your host, Steve. See you again next time.